After the shipwreck, I woke up alone on a beach. I was hungry, so I searched the nearby area and found some mushrooms. I ate them to satisfy my hunger, but was met with their poisonous attributes moments later, which quickly ate away at my health. The poison was thankfully only temporary, but I was still battling with my need for a reliable food source. I found a nearby tree and, in hopes of consuming the fruit it bore, I shook it. After the wasps made themselves visible, I realized the mistake that I made. I just described my first 5 minutes with 1999's Game Boy Color game, Survival Kids, also known as Stranded Kids in the EU. It's a game that makes the harsh realities of its world known to you immediately. In addition to having a health bar, your protagonist also needs to constantly look for sources of drinkable water, edible food, and stable housing to ward off fatigue every night. The cutesy Link Awakening-ish aesthetic of the game is in contrast to the realistic and brutal tone of Survival Kids, and this might just be the very first Game Boy Color game I've ever used the adjectives of realistic and brutal to describe. Your goal in Survival Kids is simple: survive. You start off the game with just a few simple provisions: a small knife, an empty canteen, a wet match, and a radio without any batteries. With these meager resources, you need to eke out a simple life for yourself and, if possible, find a way off of this deserted island. Surviving isn't easy though, and that is thanks in large part to a realistic set of principles and rules that drive the gameplay loop here. The center of this loop revolves around your constantly draining resources and a day-night cycle. During the day you have great visibility and can hunt animals or gather fruit, but when night rolls around, you can barely see in front of you. Much like our ancestors did, you will probably make the decision that it is wise for you to do what you need to do in the day and spend the harsh nights sleeping to recover from your fatigue. Your meager hut has a chest within it which you can store food and equipment. Just don't get the funny idea that you're going to be able to store any perishables here. Food like meat will go rotten after a day and become unsuitable for human consumption. Because of this, you will want to eat meat right away when you obtain it, but don't forget to cook it first. In order to cook it, you're going to need a fire. Better not be a rainy day or this will be impossible. Rainy days can also cause water levels to rise and make certain routes impassable, and I think you're starting to get the point. Between its weather systems, day-night cycle, and its metric ton of interactive items, Survival Kids is defined by its massive amount of interlocking gameplay systems, to a degree far more than anything else you're going to find on a 90s Game Boy Color game. That's part of why Survival Kids has become a cult classic, and why I'm playing it today. Look up any list of underrated Game Boy games, and you're more than likely to find Survival Kids among it. It was popular enough to spawn at least one Japan-exclusive numbered sequel in Survival Kids 2, but the rest of the series' lineage falls under the title Lost in Blue, mostly living on the Nintendo DS, with a single Wii title thrown in there too. None of these other games reached any level of critical success, which I think at least partially helped this first title retain a unique level of prestige. Survival Kids' value has not only held, but increased as the years pass, with loose cartridges costing you somewhere in the $60 to $70 range, significantly higher than a large majority of the Game Boy library. Survival Kids' systems encourage a large amount of experimentation. One of its other most notable attributes is how small of a guiding hand exists. The player is left largely to their own devices in this hostile environment. Depending on how you choose to play the game, you may never even see another friendly NPC to give you advice. So it's up to you to learn how to scavenge and hunt and live. There's an item merging system that allows you to take multiple items and shove them all together. There's no penalty for making a bad combination, only an error message to tell you that your specified combo doesn't work. With the lack of penalty for failed merges, and the fact that items merge in intuitive ways, you are strongly encouraged to figure these out for yourself and have no real reason to use a guide. For example, combining a flexible tree branch and a hook will get you a fishing rod. A lot of these merges are completely optional, and you can get through the entire game without seeing a good majority of them, which is a pretty good incentive to play the game multiple times. I was halfway through my second playthrough before I realized you could build a bow and arrow, which would have been really helpful the first time around. Yeah, my second playthrough. I played through the game twice because I got what could be considered one of the bad endings my first time around. The game has a ton of different endings depending on how you go about things, way more than I would have expected. The game is short enough and there's enough variability in each playthrough that running the game front to back immediately after was actually a lot more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. After spending some time with Survival Kids, I'm glad I can confirm that it's worthy of its cult classic status. It has a ton of overlapping gameplay systems, it's in a unique genre among other games on the console, and between its open-ended style and multiple endings, you're going to find plenty of reasons to play it more than once. Survival Kids is awesome, if you think you can handle it.